What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHillIllustrated.com. Or, of course, if you are watching on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining us from Coral Gables, Florida, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, not a great night for the Tar Heels, losing 85-57. Not a great night. Probably being a little bit nicer than I could be, but just not that's the word I was looking for. Understatement. Probably an understatement based on that. But I'll run through some stats a little bit later and whatnot, but let's just go ahead and dive into it as we always do. I mean, 85-57 final score, Miami picking up the win over the Tar Heels. I think you have to start on the defensive side of the ball when you see what the final score is. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I thought Carolina was poor again defensively. We've seen it in multiple games this year. We've seen this team get blown out in not in neutral site venues on the road, for lack of a better word. Before this season, it's happened. And poor defensive performances in those games is something that's been a kind of consistent theme for the Tar Heels. And we saw it again tonight. I thought Miami's, dribble drive was really good, setting up a lot of their shots. Carolina just didn't have enough any answers for it. And credit to Miami and Jim Larrañaga for the game plan that they brought into it, because from start to finish, Carolina really had no way or idea of how to stop it, particularly in that first half. And I know Carolina didn't shoot the ball well at all in that first half, or really for the whole game, but I think it started on the defensive side of the ball and, just really never got better. And no surprise the Tar Heels ended up losing by as many as they did.
I've got a Miami player shooting like 35 feet to my right over here on court side. I couldn't get a good angle to get the court in the backdrop because the lighting here would have had it crazy. And I'm watching him shoot around. He's actually missed 4 out of the last 5 shots, and he's got a student manager guarding him.
Jesus.
So that kind of puts into perspective how poorly the Tar Heels played tonight. I know he's just kind of messing around right now, but Miami's game plan, it wasn't like Jim Larrañaga had to stay up all night burning the midnight oil trying to figure out a way to take apart Carolina's stingy defense. All he had to do was watch the Tennessee game, watch Kentucky game, watch the Notre Dame game, and you saw a combination of all that tonight. And the flip side of that is you saw the very same combination from the Tar Heels either. The Tar Heels as well. They were terrible defensively. They were terrible stopping the dribble. They were terrible getting on the threes. They were terrible picking up help side defense. There's a photo, when I'm on USA Today looking for photos, because we didn't have a photographer down here, I'm trying to find some stuff that fits the game. And there's one where one of the Miami players is driving to the basket. The Carolina guy who's supposed to be guarding him is not in the picture, but Caleb Love, who's guarding somebody else, is kind of off in the distance. And it's sort of like as if and I'm not picking on Caleb here, but as if he wasn't even aware that the drive was taking place. Now, Miami only ended up converting like 9 layups in the night. Mm-hmm. 3 dunks, but they had a lot early, and it just set up everything else because they had jumpers in the lane, they had kickouts, they had all kinds of stuff, and it began with the dribble drives. And what did we point out in the 5 keys coming into this game? They must stop the dribble drive first. Make Miami a perimeter shooting team. Hurricanes have not been a real good perimeter shooting team this season, although in their last 3 home games coming into this one, they were 30 for 67. In 3 ACC games. So, and they won all those games. So the Hurricanes were outstanding from the perimeter night, but a lot of that came from the dribble drives. There's a lot of noise going on in here. Came from the dribble drives and just the fact that Carolina they didn't respond well. They didn't react well. And Miami didn't even have to set a lot of ball screens. That's the crazy thing about it, Jacob. Hubert talked yesterday about the ball screens and that they had a game plan for it. They set some ball screens early and some of those soft screens that David Sisk has talked about here in the last week, some stuff that Carolina incorporated Saturday against Georgia Tech. And Carolina wasn't switching. They were actually working through them and stuff like that. But then just the straight drive to the basket, I think it just knocked Carolina on its heels. 14-0 run early. Tar Heels never responded. The way you end a run and the way you come back when you fall behind big is through defense. Because you could score, you could shoot 60% from the floor, but if you're still giving up shots, it's not going to matter. And Hubert even pointed out to the fact that, I don't know if I think they outscored Miami, or they were even in the second half. The final margin was 28 points. Okay, they lost by 1 point in the second half because it was 27 at halftime. And he kind of pointed to that, and I'm thinking, well, it didn't matter at that time. No. Because the defense needed to be there early, and the defense wasn't there early. I asked Hubert, what was the game plan, and why didn't it work? And what were the adjustments, if any? And he said that very late in the first half, they picked up full court. Mm-hmm. Didn't work. And he was pretty clear when he said whatever adjustments they did make didn't work. They were doing some different stuff, some trapping maybe in the second half, but it was way too late. I'm surprised that he didn't go to some other defensive looks just to change things up. You know, his mentor, the guy who coached him in college, was really good. If something wasn't working for a while, you flash something new at the opponent. Mm-hmm. You know, flash a 1-3-1 for a few possessions, see how they handle it. You know, do the run and jump or the trap, try something. Mm-hmm. And they didn't. It's just the same thing. In Miami, we talked about Notre Dame running dummy offense. Miami was running dummy offense. There were times when you could see the shot 5 dribbles before the shot from my perspective. And I'm up here on above the basket about, 20 rows up or whatever it is. And I could see the shot 5 dribbles before the shot. This was as unbecoming a defensive performance and, quite frankly, overall performance as I've seen from North Carolina in a long time, especially from what should be a pretty good North Carolina team. The club 2 years ago, they were a wreck. They had a lot of injuries. That wasn't a great roster to begin with. So I'm going to push them aside. But the good teams that North Carolina's had, the ones that are NCAA teams, Hubert talked 6 weeks ago about this club being a national champion, about all the things this club could do, but the goal of winning the ACC championship, regular season championship. Well, they're 8 games in now. They're 17 games in now. And they've had 4 performances at the minimum where they look nothing remotely close to anything like that. And each time it began on the defensive end, and that was the case tonight.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like what you said about that. The game was over at halftime. It was 49-22 at the break. Miami shot 50%.
It was over before that. I tweeted about I've been at all the games and the body language. And I talked to a couple of other North Carolina writers that are here. And I asked them at halftime, said, you agree with me? Is the body language worse than Kentucky? And yeah. There were a couple guys that there'd be a dead ball and they turn it over, whatever the case was, and they do this kind of stuff going back up the court. That's a terrible sign.
Yeah, it's not.
And the thing about this club, and I know we got 3 things we could hit on, but honestly, we could hit on about 600. The thing that is, and I'm not even sure if this is one of the 3 things, so pardon me, Jacob. They don't remember how the football team would go in those stretches of like 2 quarters where the other team was just running up and down the field on them and they had no idea how to stop it.
Yeah.
This club, when it starts poorly and it's not defending, they don't figure it out. They don't change and suddenly become stout for a stretch and get back in the game. They don't play close games because they're either blowing somebody out or they're getting blown out.
Yeah.
They don't have the leadership to change things. They don't have the ability to get a series of defensive stops that can change a game and suddenly tell the other team, hey, they've stepped it up. They're making a push now. They don't have that. They're, at least if they do, they haven't shown it yet. Mm-hmm. And that should be a major concern to any Carolina fan that watched tonight's game, watching this video, or has an interest in the program. That's a big, big negative.
Yeah, most definitely. We'll hit on body language a little bit later too, because I do want to ask you a question about that a little bit later on in this podcast. I'm going to run into some stats before we move on to the second thing. Armando Bacot did lead the way for the Tar Heels. I know he did struggle early on, in particular in the first half, was kind of frustrated by some of the things Miami was doing. And like I said, credit to Miami for what they were able to do against him. 15 and 12 for Bacot, another double-double for him. But that's his 8th straight. RJ Davis with 9 points. Brady Manick, then Dontrez Styles, who got a lot of burn towards the end of the kind of the second half, or majority of the second half, finished with 7 points as well. But looking at those shooting percentages, Miami actually only ended up shooting 46% for the game, shot 58.1% in the first half. Carolina shooting just 22% in the first half as well. So you see that contrast. No surprise, it's 49-22 at the break. And like AJ said, that game was over a lot earlier than that. Tar Heels shot 44% in the second half. Miami actually only shot 34.4%, but I know there was a lot of guys that don't usually get minutes in for the Hurricanes as well. So that had a lot to do with it. Hey, just go ahead and talk about offense now. I think it's a perfect segue into it because I do want to hit on offense. That wasn't great either. I mean, 57 points, 22 at the break. Shooting was horrible. Carolina shot 33.8% from the game. Like I said, a little bit better in the second half at 44.1%, but just 20% from three-point land as well, 63% from the free throw line. So just not a good game from Carolina offensively. You hit it on earlier. It wasn't a good performance on defense, but it wasn't much better on offense as well. Tar Heels looked all out of sorts, And, I think it's a credit to Miami again and Jim Larinaga with scouting the Tar Heels. I know it's based on the performances we've seen from Carolina, you don't have to look too far to figure out what Carolina really struggles with doing. They've had games like this year, but credit to them for scouting Carolina in the way in which they did, because I think Miami's defense was a bigger factor in Carolina's struggles than some games in the past when Carolina struggled shooting the ball. Credit to the Miami for doing that.
Yeah, they weren't allowing the entries. Armando's first bucket came with 7:34 left in the half, and he had 3 points at halftime. They were down by 27. I mean, you could put a period there and end the conversation with a healthy footnote of the defensive mess that was the Tar Heels tonight. But Armando couldn't get open. They were fronting. They had a guy in front of them, a guy behind them. There were no entry lanes at all, and they really. I think they really affected Carolina's ability to dribble and create off that, their swings. There was nothing that they were doing well. Their best play of the night was the first bucket. That was when Leakey hit Manick in the left corner for a 3, and it was an alert play. To me, it was an extension of what we saw Saturday. And then they were up 5-2, and Caleb had a bucket like 2 minutes later. They had a couple tough shots that didn't go in, and then they were awful the rest of the night.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really, really bad defensively, and I think that's on them. They were really bad offensively. I think a lot of that has to do with Miami. And I'm giving Miami obviously gets credit for the first half. I mean, Sam Wartenberg shredded.
I mean, when you're hitting shots like that, what can you say?
He had 17 at the half, and his previous career high was 18 earlier this year on this court against Clemson. He was driving the lane and dunking and stuff like that, but the Tar Heels weren't returning it. Sometimes – a team's really playing well, and you just got to be great offensively to match it for a while, and then get those stops and make it pay off. But they never got it. They never had that stretch. They never had that little spurt. They did cut it. I think they had like a 6-0 spurt early in the second half. Miami pushed it to right before Miami then pushed it to 32. They cut it to goodness, was it maybe 24 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
And they had a little 6-0 spurt when Armando started to get going. And but honestly, I'm looking at the body language, and there was nothing. I mean, I had already started. I mean, I layer the takeaways during the course of the game, but I actually was writing the lead graph of the story of the game, and it was like 15 minutes left. Yeah, because the body language was very clear. I know we're going to talk about that in a second, but I think that had an effect on defense, that had an effect on offense. They didn't have it. Caleb 2 for 12, I think. RJ no assists. We've talked a lot about how every game but one, they have had a 20-point score. They didn't have one tonight, so it's the second one. But, I've said a few times, boy, when they run out of the tunnel, Hubert knows a couple of those guys are going to have really good games. Even if they don't score in the 20, they have multiple guys in the 20s. They're going to have someone in the 20s and someone at like 17 or 18. They didn't have any of that tonight. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were awful. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to play it.
I don't want to pick on anybody here, but they were just bad. And the film tells you that. The statistics tell you that. Hubert's demeanor when we spoke with him after the game was very clear. I mean, he was asked questions about certain things like, I don't know.
Yeah, he had no clue. Yeah,
he had no idea what to say, because when you're that bad, when you're that inexplicably bad, and it flared up again. It's not the first. It happened in November, happened in December, middle of November. What was it? November 21st. Then it happened December, 18th against Kentucky, and here we are January 18th. So once a month they're going to pull a complete no-show and be awful on both ends of the court. And if this was football and they had special teams, they probably would have allowed a punt return for a touchdown and had a kick block. That's how poor they were tonight. Every aspect of the game, as a basketball team, they were poor tonight. Literally every aspect from the bench down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to hit on body language real quick before we wrap this one up. It's kind of the third thing. We've already talked about it a little bit, so I'll ask you kind of a question about it, and I'll kind of give my reason for it. What do you kind of make of UNC struggles against better opponents? And the reason I'm asking that is because obviously you're there at the game. You've been at these games. A lot of these I've watched on TV. For me, it looks like, and I think a lot of Carolina fans will agree from what I've seen on Twitter and what I've seen on social media and in our message boards as well during the game, that for me, it's mental. I mean, it almost seems that Carolina just gets in this mental block or rut where body language is bad. They're not hitting shots. They're playing bad defense. They don't really look interested. And on TV, from kind of the outside looking in, obviously I hear the press conferences sitting on those, but from the outside looking in, watching it, it kind of looks like they have no clue from a coaching staff perspective. I'm not blaming them, and from a player's perspective, how to fix it.
It's a coach's responsibility.
So, that was one thing I saw on Twitter was a lot of people were kind of defending the coaching staff and say, now this is on the players, but it's up to the coaching staff to get and have his players, and for lack of a better, the whole group of players ready to play. So what do you make of Carolina's struggles against better teams? Because I mean, at this point, it's what Carolina is. It's mid-January. I mean, it's their identity now. I mean, you can't run away from it,
If people are going to heap praise on Hubert for the way they played against Georgia Tech and the way they played against Virginia, then you have to apply the same logic when they show up and play like they did tonight. And the fact is that I asked him what adjustments were made. Yeah. And he said that they went to trapping full court pressure late in the first half. This was a 20-point game long before late in the first half. This game was cruising off a cliff. I mean, he called a timeout before the second TV timeout. In the first half, two of the TV timeouts. The TV timeouts occur at the under 4 spots, under 16, under 12, under 8, under 4. Two of them occurred before those because of timeouts that Hubert called, because the team wasn't playing well. I didn't see those adjustments. And he acknowledged that he didn't make those adjustments till late in the first half. So I think why not go to a 1-3-1 or like I was saying about the defensive part in that segment. I mean, I'm not a coach. I don't know. I'm not a communicator with the kids. I'm not in the locker room. I don't know the dynamics. I don't know the buttons to push with these kids, but I know what I saw and I know what I've seen several times this year. And this isn't the first time where he said, I don't know after the game. So he's the head coach. Yeah. Of course he deserves a lot of blame for this. You cannot have it heap praise on a coach when they play well. It's the kid's fault when they
it goes both ways. Yeah.
These are college kids. I do think they should be ready to play most nights. And I think maybe one of the struggles that Hubert has, he's told us several times that he never had that issue when he played. Hubert had a chip when he got into college. Because Dean Smith didn't even tell him he could play at Carolina until Dean Smith went ahead and offered and said, well, maybe you could play at Carolina. I want to give you that opportunity. He did that. He was told he couldn't play in the NBA, but he proved he could play in the NBA. Told he couldn't play the point any in the NBA. And he worked all summer and became a little bit, a backup point guard, some in the NBA. So his whole mindset with the game of basketball has always been, I got to be ready to play. I'm sure he's kind of been, look, if I don't get the job done here, I'm going to lose my spot in the rotation. I'm going to lose my job, whatever it is. Because it wasn't like Hubert was an all-star in the NBA. He strung together 12 years very impressively, and he did so because he approached every night with a similar type of mindset and mental toughness. And he said a couple of times, I don't understand why they don't, because he did it. So he's going to have to learn as a coach how to see that and how to kind of find the buttons to push or moves to make to kind of nip it before it really goes off the rails. Roy used substitutions as a means to do that. Hubert has told us a couple of times that, he does use the bench as a means of motivation, but we didn't really see that a lot. I know Styles came in with about 16 minutes left in the game, but it was 32-point game.
Yeah, game was over, yeah.
Sometimes if the guys are I'll never forget, and this is super old school here, so please, oblige me this moment here. I'll never forget when Indiana played in Illinois, like in 1988 or something like that. Indiana was just getting stomped. Bobby Knight took all the starters out. Started the second half with a bunch of reserves. I'm not sure he even played the starters again. He just said, you know what, we're going to take it on the derriere here, and I'm going to prove a point. Now that this has happened a few times, perhaps tonight would have been a good night to just do that. Say, okay, we're getting our butts kicked. We're going to get our butts kicked. They have no answers. I don't have the buttons to push here. So you got to pull them off. And sometimes you got to use a heavy hand. Mm-hmm. Tonight would have been a good time to do that, because I don't know what was learned, because we had the same conversation with RJ and Hubert after the game tonight we did in Las Vegas after the Kentucky game. It was similar to Tennessee, but at least at Tennessee, like, okay, and what did you and I talk about? Well, that happens sometimes. And they played yesterday, and they played Purdue tough, and there's a close loss, back-to-back games, so they'll learn from this. Well, we said that after Kentucky. We said that after Notre Dame when Caleb acknowledged that they took Notre Dame lightly. Well, here they are tonight, and here we are talking about it. There wasn't one negative Saturday against Georgia Tech. There's not one positive from this game. So, cut Hubert some slack. He's got a learning curve. He's a first-time head coach at this level. So, of course, he gets a lot of slack. He's going to learn from these things. The guy knows a trillion times more about basketball than any of us participating or watching this video know. So he's got the basketball DNA to figure this out and make it happen. But sometimes it takes time as a head coach to learn how to push buttons. And sometimes one kid's got a different button than another kid. Sometimes the whole team doesn't have the same button. So if only two kids respond positively to it and nobody else does, that's not going to work. So I guess if there is a silver lining to this, it's Hubert has to go back with his staff and reevaluate and figure out, okay, the kids, we couldn't right the ship. We couldn't, ignite them with some juice and get them to roar back. And you give up a 14-0 run early and there was no response to it at all. It was almost like their body language as if the game was over. So he's going to have to figure that out. So yeah, it is on the players, but it's also on the staff.
Yeah, definitely goes both ways.
So they're going to have to figure it out. They have some real ugly losses on their resume. They are in a very difficult situation right now, positioned 17 games in the season, and how they're going to figure out a way to get into the NCAA tournament. This is a bad league. Tonight was a rare opportunity for a Q1 win and a really good win, and they weren't close. So they have 4 Q1 games they've played so far, I believe. And they have Purdue, which was a competitive loss, Tennessee, which was a blowout loss, Kentucky was a blowout loss, this was a blowout loss. So they're in danger of playing themselves out of the tournament, even if they pick up a bunch of wins, because it was as impressive as they were beating Georgia Tech both times, as impressive as they were in Chestnut Hill, that's not going to get you in the NCAA tournament when you play in a league as down as the ACC is this year. So this club's got a lot to fix.
Yeah.
Big time. And I don't think I'm opening up anybody's eyes here on this one. I think a lot of people could see it.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And we talked about it on our preview podcast, for lack of a better word, we did earlier this week about how big of an opportunity this Miami game and the Wake Forest game this weekend is. And not a great start for the Tar Heels in terms of, like I said, a week that I think was full of opportunity and a chance, like you mentioned, for the Tar Heels to finally pick up a Q1 win against the Hurricanes, but wasn't to be, losing 85-57, big time loss for the Tar Heels in conference play, dropping to 4-2 in the ACC. So in a good position coming into tonight, but losing to the league leaders in Miami like they did, dropping Carolina a little bit back in the race for that ACC regular season championship. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones, though. Appreciate you guys watching. AJ, I'm going to let you go outside, man. I guess it's not going to be like 20 degrees out there when you walk out the arena.
No, but it's like 54. It's like 54.
So it might as well be 20 down there.
People are complaining here. They're complaining more here than they were in South Bend 2 weeks ago when it was 10 and the wind chill was below zero. They're like, I live in South Bend. I expect this. People down here, they don't expect this.
Yeah, 54. They're like, come on, man. What is this crap? Hey, well, hopefully it'll be better.
It happened because I came here. So
exactly right, AJ. It's your fault, man. Oh well, you live and you learn. Nothing you can do about it. It's just how it's going to be. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Though, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. Make sure you head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com too. Link in the description below. For all your coverage from tonight's game and all the recap from tonight's game. Get involved in our message boards as well if you're a premium subscriber, which you can do for just $8.33 a month. Great time to do it with all the stuff going on. Heat of basketball season right now. So as always, guys, we appreciate you watching. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks.